Welcome to LifeChangers, a program designed to give solutions to the problems of daily living. Today we will be talking about relationship issues and especially what will push people over the edge. Here is a hypothetical situation. Manohar is 45 years old. He has an excellent career and financially he is doing well. However, he surprised his friends and family members by a suicidal attempt one night. When asked about the reasons for his suicidal attempt, it became very clear that it was nothing but a quarrel with his wife that led to the incident. While analyzing the matter further, it was found that he had been having frequent personality conflicts with his wife for a while. To make matters worse, he also had conflicting issues with his boss. But the last incident that pulled the trigger was a quarrel with his wife. Does this sound familiar to you? We may have control on pain, disabling symptoms of sickness, worry, anxiety, and other such problems. For many of these, we may even find medication to help us. But a type of problem for which there is no medication is interpersonal problems. This is what pushes people over the edge most of the time. We hear of such stories all the time in our world. People resorting to self-destructive actions when relationships fail. Personally, I think if we practice just a fraction of what our religions teach, we will make significant strides in relationships. If we can practice a fraction of our prayers, we will truly make a difference. We pray for the world while undermining the little things that we can do to make the people around us happy. Finally, let me discuss 6 conditions under which relationship issues can push us over the edge. Number 1, when relationships are too entangled, too close that we lose individualization and objectivity. In other words, it may not be very healthy to have too much attachment with little or no room for detachment to think objectively. Number 2, when a person is extremely dependent on others, thus placing oneself in a vulnerable position to be pushed over the edge. This usually happens when one is denied of something. Number 3, when a person is extremely touchy and sensitive, placing oneself in a position to be easily hurt. Number 4, when a person expects everybody to be completely loving toward him or her. In the real world, we know we cannot be loved or accepted by everybody. Now, number 5, when a person sees relationship problems as the worst thing that can happen in life. On the other hand, if we can think that relationship problems are sometimes unavoidable, and it is okay to have some friction, some quarrels, and some misunderstanding, we won't be too disappointed. And finally, when there is too much restriction and punishment in a relationship. Now, I would like to have a discussion with a group of students from St. Thomas University in Miami, Florida. These are graduate students who are taking training in the area of counseling, and they're also teachers. And let me introduce these students to you. Susanna, Lisa, and Leanne.
Hi.
So we're going to go over these 6 conditions that I just went over. Before we do that, how are you all doing?
Good, thank you.
Good, thank
Fine,
you.
thanks.
Well, I'm glad you joined me for this discussion. And these are 3 of my bright students, very smart students, and I have a very strong feeling that they are going to contribute much to this broadcast. The first one is when relationships are too entangled, too close that we lose individualization and objectivity. In other words, it may not be very healthy to have too much attachment with little or no room for detachment to think objectively. What do you think about this?
I think it's true if you are too enmeshed in a relationship, whether it be boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, or even a parent and a child, or a counselor and a student, or a teacher and a student. it's hard to remain completely objective if you can't, you know, keep the relationship separate, you know, see yourself as an individual and that person as an individual, and remind yourself that, you know, even though you may share this certain relationship with them, that they're still an individual and you're still an individual, and to view them objectively and how they're feeling and speaking.
Right, right. Now, let's define enmeshment. I know that that's a term that's familiar to us. What is enmeshment? How would you define it?
Possibly when your needs overlap with the needs of the other person in the relationship.
Excellent. That's true. That's true. So being just too close, emotionally too close. Like you said, then your needs, your personal needs overlap the needs of the other person.
Yeah, possibly.
Excellent.
Lack
Excellent.
of boundaries.
So there are boundaries that need to be respected. That is true.
And piggybacking on what Lisa said, sometimes as a teacher, you have students in your classroom where they need that extra touchy-feely attention that you have to give them.
Right.
But at the same time, you have to tell yourself, I'm their teacher, we have this relationship, and you have to make that call. Where do you draw the line? Where does that boundary end?
Excellent. I think it also affects client therapist relationship too, where after some time they can be somewhat enmeshed, or at least in the mind of the client.
Right. Because they grow to depend
Right.
in that type of relationship. If it's lengthy,
Yes.
they grow to depend on their therapist, to almost, you know, like a family member. Like they go to them, seeking them
Right.
for, you know, their
Right.
thoughts and ideas, and
Right.
even sometimes approval,
Right.
like they would to a family member.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You can also see how transference and countertransference will take place as a result of this. Right.
Right.
And also expectations of different relationships.
Yes.
If you have unreasonable expectations for, say, the counselor-client relationship,
Right.
then it's, you know, going to be disappointed
Right.
if they're unreasonable or not appropriate.
So the point is having a little bit of detachment, not staying too attached. You know, this whole theory about attachment, detachment, and detachment. When we are attached, we want to detach. When we are too detached, we want to attach. You know, it's human thinking. So I think a comfortable position is where you can be attached and detached. You know, having a comfortable distance, respecting boundaries, respecting individualization, and that'll be very helpful so that we can be very objective.
And it's usually going to be one person that's going to have to sort of initiate that, because like in a teacher-child, student-teacher relationship,
Right.
the student may not know where that boundary is, and it
Right.
would be your responsibility as the teacher to make the student aware of that boundary.
Yes, that is true. That is true. I mean, in therapy too, we have to do that. I think when you find that your client is crossing the boundary, then in a very gentle way, you may have to help the client understand where the boundaries are.
Right.
I find myself doing that in therapy sometimes. The second one is when a person is extremely dependent on others, thus placing oneself in a vulnerable position to be pushed over the edge. This usually happens when one is denied of something. So here we are talking about overdependence.
In any type of relationship, you need to learn not to depend on that other person, because when that person's not there, you have to be able to do for yourself.
Right, right.
And you know, it's just
Right.
important to
Yeah,
be able to
sure.
be yourself and do things for yourself.
Right.
I think in any relationship, there's always going to be a little bit of dependency on both
Yes,
sides.
which is normal.
Right. For certain things,
Right.
you know. I mean, usually, you know, stereotypically, maybe in a relationship or in a marriage, the husband might pay the bills and the wife might do this, and everybody takes their role. But you need to be able to not depend so much on that person to always
Right.
function in that role, because I mean, God forbid anything happens to that person and you have to take over doing what their responsibilities were, you need to know, you know, how to pay the bills, where the life insurance policy is, you know, those
Right.
little things that that you don't want to just let somebody else take care of all the
Right.
time.
And especially in long-term relationships.
Right.
And sometimes we find this with geriatrics, when you do counseling with them. You know, when one passes away, the other one is totally devastated. Like you said, you know, doesn't know where the paperwork is and
Yes.
all such
Right.
things.
I know an example of a person that I know, where her husband, you know, was diagnosed with a terminal illness.
Yes.
And he was the one that took care of everything. She was the one that ran the business, but she had no idea where anything was. And, you know, he was gone, and she was completely,
Right.
you know, not only is she dealing with the fact that he's gone, but now she's got to deal with all these other things,
Exactly.
the bills,
Mhm.
and she didn't know where to start. And she was completely dependent on him for that. So it's important to be able to do for yourself.
Yeah, on a practical level, we see the dependency, and then also an emotional level. Sometimes there can be emotional dependence, looking for that person to kind of complete any deficiencies or things in their own characters or personalities. And so,
That's true.
Yeah.
I think you're talking about interdependence. There's a healthy side to interdependence. Yeah, I think that we need to have, definitely.
And like she said, in practical terms, I mean, sometimes, like if there's a discrepancy in a bill, whatever
Right.
the bill is, the water bill, the electric bill, the cell phone bill, typically, I mean, from experiences that I've seen, one person is always usually the one who handles and calls the company and maybe confronts the person on the phone, where the other person is the non-confrontational one and they don't want to discuss it. But you, as an individual, need to, you know, if your partner or your husband or your wife is doing that, maybe you should try it once, because you never know. You may be in a position where you may have to confront or make a call that you may not necessarily make and handle that situation, even though you may not want to, because that's the role the other person takes.
Yes.
There should be a balance.
There should be a
Yeah.
balance, yes. Okay, the third one is when a person is extremely touchy and sensitive, placing oneself in a position to be easily hurt. I know we are all sensitive to some degree, and I personally am sensitive, I know. And but I do know I need to move on, and I have some control on it. And where this can be a problem is when people are just too sensitive. For example, you know, some people can get depressed over maybe something that somebody said, maybe taking a little word out of the entire conversation,
Right.
and just dwelling on that, and being extremely sensitive, and extremely sensitive to criticism. There are people who will leave their job so quickly over some constructive criticism. So that's being extremely sensitive. Can you think of situations where people behave like this?
I think that with, for me, can speak for myself, with time you learn to just kind of not really take things personal.
Yes.
Whereas when when I was younger, I would just, anything anybody would say, oh my goodness, the person, was directed to me.
Right.
Now, things happen. Yeah, they bother you.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? You learn to get over them. If you
That's
have
true.
to, if it was like somewhere where you had to confront a situation, you confront it, you apologize if you need to, and then, move on with your life.
Exactly.
Because you can't dwell over that for a long period of time, because you'll drive yourself crazy.
That is true.
But,
That is true.
I guess that comes with age and with time, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
sometimes we never get over it. But
I know. I know. I know you don't look that old, but
No, but
But you have already learned.
from my teens to my 20s,
yes.
I've seen the difference. So.
And you need to learn that professionally speaking, and
Right.
no matter what your job is, that there will be criticisms that come your way. And unfortunately, some people are not as tactful as other people. And you may have to experience someone who's not as tactful, and they may approach it to you in maybe not the best way, but you need to realize that that's their personality, and it's their way of being constructive, and try and not take it to heart and say, okay, I made a mistake here, let me fix it. They're just telling me this because they want to see me succeed and do better,
Right.
not because they want to put me down.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah, not taking it personally, seeing it's one person's perspective, it's not the end-all, be-all of
That is true.
opinions
Mhm.
and, not letting it
true.
affect us
Right.
personally.
That's true.
Well, I know too with students, in the teacher-student relationship, like you want your students to participate in class, but the thing with them is they're so sensitive about making mistakes. They don't want to make a mistake in front of all the students. They feel like the other students will chastise them and make fun of them. And then when they do make a mistake, and the kids do laugh because that's what kids do,
Right.
Encouraging them to say, at least you tried.
Right. Right.
It's good that you got up there. Sometimes we fail at things that we
Right,
do,
right.
and
Sure. I think a good point here is that the tendency to generalize. Yeah, you got some constructive criticism over something, and then you think you are really not doing good in other areas too, sort of generalizing it. I think that is where sometimes people develop problems. Okay, the next one is when a person expects everybody to be completely loving toward him or her. In the real world, we know we cannot be loved or accepted by everyone. Talking about love, what do you say?
It's true. You're going to have situations where, you may think, I need to be loved, I need to be cared for, but that's not necessarily true.
Yes.
You're going to meet people along the way, and they're just going to be acquaintances, and then you are going to meet people that you really care for, and you shouldn't always be under that impression that you have to be loved and cared for by everyone.
By everybody.
Right.
Right.
it's kind of irrational to think that
It
way.
is irrational. That's right. That's
to,
right.
to think that you could possibly be loved by everybody. I mean, you're not. I mean, you're just in your job, in your relationships, the people that like Leanne said, the paths that you cross in your life, you're going to run into people that, won't have those feelings towards
Right.
you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
One other thing I was thinking was the need for loving ourselves. We have to be our own friends too, isn't it? So if you depend on just the love of others, others might fail us. And so we have to be loving towards ourselves.
Maybe that's part of the problem, is that this need of wanting and needing to be loved by everybody else is because of the lack of love that we have for ourselves.
Right, right.
Because maybe it's hard for that one person to love themselves, so they seek it
Right.
from everybody else, when if they look just at themselves, they,
Sure. Exactly. Yeah. I'm thinking of, that Bible verse, love your neighbor like you love yourself. So there is that need for us to be loving ourselves too.
Absolutely.
The next one is when a person sees relationship problems as the worst thing that can happen in life. On the other hand, if we can think that relationship problems are sometimes unavoidable and it is okay to have some friction, some quarrels, and some misunderstanding, we won't be too disappointed.
There's so many other things to focus on, so many other positive things than to focus on what's going bad in your relationship or what are the negative things. And sometimes it's okay to get rid of that relationship,
Okay.
to part your ways. Maybe that's the unhealthy
Right.
thing that's in your life at that moment, and that's what you need to
That is.
get rid of.
You have a great point there. I think there's a healthy side to ending relationships, right?
Focus on
Not to hold any enmity against that person, but the need for you to remain healthy, you may have to do that, right?
and focus on all the other positive things that are going on in your life.
Okay.
So,
The last one is when there is too much restriction and punishment in a relationship. So here we are talking about too much of restriction and too much of punishment. Can you imagine that happening in relationships? Now, we don't have to think of just family relationships. All sorts of relationships out there,
I think, well, I mean, I know you said not just with family, but one that comes to mind directly is the parent-child relationship.
Yes.
When you have too much restriction, like some parents feel like there's got to be rules, and they're so strict and they're so restricted that
Right.
sometimes the way a child behaves is as a result just to rebel against the parent because there's so many restrictions on them.
There's too many restrictions.
Right. That there needs
Right.
to be, again, like Leanne said previously, there's got to be a balance. I
Yes.
mean, it's good to have some restrictions when it benefits, when it's for
Right.
the good
Right.
of the child and the good of the parent, but, sometimes you got to give a little too.
Yes. You know those 3 types of parenting?
Yes.
What are those?
Authoritative.
Good.
Authoritarian.
Authoritarian.
Permissive.
Permissive. Okay. So authoritative is like a nice balance where you have restrictions and you have rules and curfews, but there is room for children to have their
grow
freedom,
and
to
grow.
grow and
Freedom.
develop, right?
To grow, I think.
So what is authoritarian?
The one that's
Dictator.
cutthroat.
Dictating.
And
Yes, yes.
That's it.
I mean, they are too restrictive
Yeah.
and too rigid with their rules. And what is permissive?
they can do
No
whatever they
rules.
want.
Do whatever they
No
want.
rules.
Yeah.
Exactly. So again, the point is, how too much of restriction and too much of punishment can affect somebody's life, a child's life. I think we'll stop there. We had some great discussion, and you people really did a great job. Friends, thank you for tuning to Life Changers. I hope you will tune in again next time. Let me give you my website address, www.lifechangersbroadcasting.com. Once again, www.lifechangersbroadcasting, that's one word, .com. Please email us with your comments and your feedback. You can also write to us via our mailing address, Attention Life Changers, PO Box 550032, Fort Lauderdale, Florida 33355, USA. If this program has been helpful to you, please consider sponsoring us by sending your donations to our mailing address. All donations are tax deductible within the United States.
LifeChangers.